Welcome to today's Aquila University session, eCopy for medical devices. A quick note, we are recording this training and it will be put on our website. So if you're uncomfortable with sharing your questions, the answer, and possibly the name you used to log in, please disconnect now and I will make sure to email you with the training as soon as it's available on our website. My name is Josh Boutwell, and I founded Aquila about 5 years ago, and have been working in regulatory for quite some time now, helping companies develop and submit a wide variety of applications. As an overview of what we're going to cover today, first we're going to discuss what exactly eCopy is and who must submit it. Then we'll go over the structure, and there will be some time for questions, and then, of course, our next session. So, what exactly is eCopy? eCopy is the first step in submitting electronic copies of your medical device applications to the FDA. And as of January 2013, it's actually required to submit an eCopy version of 10Ks, PMAs, and several others in order to facilitate the review. This is very similar to what happened with small molecules and biologics. They had NDAs, which were very similar to eCopy, and they had to submit those for quite some time, and have since moved on to completely electronic submission. eCopy is defined as an exact duplicate, and this is a very, in many ways, a very nebulous term, just because it's almost impossible to create an exact duplicate. The reality is you're going to be running things in Word, and you need to convert them to PDF and burn them on a disk. And you need to be able to, you need to make sure that you keep that in mind as you are creating your documents. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult to assemble the exact copy that you need for copy. Now, who must submit? This is straight off the FDA's website. It tells you who's required to and which submission types are voluntary. Even voluntary generally means recommended, and recommended, as far as the FDA is concerned, effectively means required. So even if it says voluntary, seriously think about sending eCopy. While some people are very intimidated by it, it's a very simple process if you start with sending it in mind when you begin your authoring. Let's discuss the structure. Copy structure is very straightforward. You have, of course, a cover letter. And since you're sitting in paper, you have to identify volume and versus non-volume submissions. We'll go over that. There is a naming scheme which gets a little long, but is fairly straightforward. There are a few places for extra files. You'll want to do a basic remediation. Of course, how do you actually submit this submission, this copy? Cover letter. And it's you're providing cover letter that states explicitly that this is an exact copy. If there's some reason why it's not an exact copy, you'll need to identify it. Some examples might be this has the eCopy has the clinical data in data sets, which is possible to put into the paper one because they're an electronic format. that would be an acceptable reason to have it not be an exact duplicate. But generally, you want to avoid anything that, any reason to not have an exact duplicate. And it goes in a cover letter that's attached to the disk or drive or whatever it is you're submitting this on. Now, the copy structure. There are two different methods. There's a volume and non-volume. So the volume is when you're doing your paper submission, it's broken into volumes. You just create a folder for each volume, and each section in that submission is a document. In that volume is its own document. This is much easier to navigate in doing the review as long as you can actually match the volume. You have the option of doing a non-volume, which is taking each section and putting it in its own document root. These are legitimate. You generally want to go with the volumized one just because the goal here is to make the lives easier for your reviewers. Now, what is the naming scheme? Folders must have a capital VOL underscore, then a 3-digit number underscore, then a name. And files, a very similar thing, just have the 3-digit number underscore, and then a descriptive name. The descriptive names are, so for instance, cover letter, table of contents, things like that, so that it's easy to identify what is in the file once it opens up the disk. Here you are not using descriptive name because there are still path length issues of around 250 characters. I generally want to stay below 200 characters for everything. And of course, now, all files must be PDFs. There are only 2 places for extra files where you're allowed to not have PDFs. And generally, PDFs need to be 50 megabytes or less. You can submit higher, and it won't be rejected if you do, but if there needs to be a good reason for it. For instance, it's image files or something like that for X-rays or data sets or something like that, where it's not realistically practical to reduce the file size. There are 2 sections for extra files. These are really the only places where you can have non-PDF files. The first miscellaneous file, and again, this is for anything that's not a PDF. So Word copies, if you have extra images that aren't in PDF, if you have to do an electronic label or something along those lines, it would go in the miscellaneous file. We have statistical data, which is any SAS data sets. And these can be very large, but you try to break them up into files that are 50 megabytes or less. And these all include zip files. So your statistical data, if you have, you want to do 1 data package per study, or if it's small enough, you could put it together. It's really however you prefer to present it, but to keep everything under 50 bytes. That's if you're breaking 50 megabytes, consider breaking up the files into multiple zip files. Now, remediation. And by remediation, we mean going through what you're submitting and verifying that it meets all the requirements. So number one, again, all PDFs must be less than 50 megabytes. Again, theoretically, you can submit higher than 50 megabytes. 100 megabytes would be acceptable, but try to avoid it. Do whatever you can to get them less than 50. All PDFs must be less than Adobe version 11. This is so that the reviewer has the software necessary to view it correctly. And go with, if you're following step 1, 50 megabytes or less, you generally have to avoid scanned documents. Scanned documents can be very, very large, and you want to avoid them if at all possible. But we can't do OCR on them, even if it isn't a very good scan and the OCR is almost useless, better than nothing. And the FDA does expect to be able to copy and paste. Next, create internal bookmarks and links. So internal bookmarks and links mean inside that one document. So if you've got a document that your table of contents, don't bother linking from your table of contents to elsewhere in the submission. You've got a report that's about table 2. You need to put a link to table 2 that's in the same document in that document. This aids the review and makes it just that much easier for the FDA to go through your application. And submissions must all include a cover letter. This is a paper cover letter. And they must be sent on a CD, a DVD, or a flash drive with your application. Now, at this point, are there any questions? Thanks for joining us. Our next university will be on the publishing method of enterprise systems. And we'll discuss what an enterprise system is, you might integrate it into your organization, and what are some of the advantages and problems of using this type of system to handle your authoring and your publishing support.